Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we are diving into this absolutely fascinating concept in this explainer. And I'm telling you, it is going to completely reframe how we view ownership, how we look at our time, and ultimately how we measure success. Seriously, if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right on paper, but you're somehow still missing out on the actual best parts of life, yeah, you are definitely going to want to pay close attention to this. We're unpacking some really profound insights on happiness and stress, and the core idea we're looking at today is going to turn a lot of what modern society tells us right on its head. So get comfortable and let's jump right in. Okay, let's start things off with this. Take a look at this brilliantly thought-provoking proverb, Samu iyawa. This actually comes from the Hausa language, which is widely spoken in northern Nigeria and across a bunch of other African countries. It's one of those phrases that's been passed down through generations, and like all the truly great proverbs out there, it packs this massive philosophical punch into just a tiny handful of words. Now, what's super interesting here is the direct translation. It literally means, having something is better than knowing how to use it. Now, wait, at first glance, your brain probably completely rejects that, right? It feels incredibly counterintuitive. I mean, we live in this era that absolutely worships expertise. We are totally obsessed with knowing the absolute, quote-unquote, optimal way to do literally everything. But this ancient wisdom, it completely challenges that modern obsession. It dares to ask us, what good is having perfect knowledge if you don't actually possess the thing itself? To really wrap our heads around this, we need to look at a classic fable that brings this whole proverb to life. So picture this fable. A snake somehow gets his hands on, well, acquires a horse. Now, obviously, a snake has absolutely no arms or legs, right? So he's just wrapped super awkwardly around the middle of the horse, just kind of bumping along down the dirt road. Well, along comes the tortoise. And in these fables, the tortoise is always the famously wise, totally knowledgeable one. So the tortoise is walking on the side of the road, and he starts laughing at the snake. He's mocking him, going, "That is not how you ride a horse. You're meant to sit on it perfectly, like this." And the snake just looks down from the horse and delivers literally the ultimate comeback. He says, "Hey, the fact that I've got it is better. Even if I don't know how to perfectly use it, at least it's mine to do whatever I want with." And man, the tortoise had zero comeback for that. Because at the end of the day, the tortoise was still on foot. He had all the theory in the world, but the snake actually had the horse. And this brilliantly sets up our next leap. When we usually hear a fable like this, or when we talk about ownership today, our minds immediately go to physical minimalism, or like that endless debate about renting versus buying property. People are always saying, "Oh, I'd rather rent. I don't want the headache of maintaining a house." But what if this Hausa proverb isn't about physical stuff at all? What if we move past the real estate and the material possessions and apply this exact same logic to the intangible assets in our lives? Which brings us to Section 1, the trap of theoretical knowledge. Let's look at a pretty stark reality check here. Consider the amazing professional. You know the type. This is the person who reads all the books, listens to all the podcasts, knows literally all the parenting tricks, and understands every communication framework to be the absolute perfect spouse or friend. They know the playbook, but they have zero free time to actually use any of it. Then, in stark contrast, we have the imperfect parent or partner. They definitely do not have it all figured out. They make mistakes. They're a little awkward sometimes, kind of like the snake on the horse, right? But here's the kicker. They are present. They're learning as they go because they actually possess the time to be there physically and emotionally. So the absolutely crucial point is summarized perfectly right here. Possessing the horse of time, even if you're making a bunch of mistakes while you're riding it, is vastly superior to having that tortoise knowledge, but being completely starved of the time to actually execute it. I mean, knowing how to be a great mother, father, or friend, in theory, is completely useless if your crazy schedule prevents you from ever actually stepping into that role. Having the actual time to just fumble through it, that is a much, much greater asset. All right, moving right along to Section 2, the channel for our light. So there's this concept from a famous preacher that just beautifully articulates this. It goes, with so much entrance of light, there has to be a channel. Now, in this context, light represents knowledge, revelation, understanding. As human beings, we are just constantly absorbing light. We learn new skills, we develop new perspectives every single day. But if that light has nowhere to go, if you have absolutely no channel to display it or use it or share it because you're trapped in some rigid, inflexible system, it doesn't just quietly fade away. It actually ferments. And let me tell you, trapped knowledge has some serious consequences. When people lack the autonomy to actually use what they know, it manifests as this intense bubbling stress and frustration. Have you ever noticed someone just having sudden bursts of rudeness or these weird behavioral shifts? often that's just a complete lack of an outlet. And this perfectly illustrates what happens with teenagers. We cram their brains full of all these amazing things. I mean, their minds are literal sponges, but if we just boss them around and never give them a chance to speak up or share the cool new things they figured out, they rebel. And that rebellion, a lot of the time, it's really just trapped knowledge violently looking for a channel to get out. So how do we actually fix this for the younger generation? We have to actively provide those channels. First, we've got to recognize that they are absorbing new light every single day. Second, we must provide safe, creative outlets for them. This could be writing, it could be drawing, or hey, even letting them run a faceless YouTube channel where their privacy is totally protected, but their creativity is just unleashed. And finally, we have to actually listen. We have to allow them to share that knowledge freely. Giving them the time and the space, giving them the horse, so to speak, to experiment with what they know is absolutely crucial for their mental health. Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, the true definition of wealth. Take a look at this daily timeline. You know what's really interesting about it? It's how entirely normal it looks. This routine is exactly what society labels as success. You leave the house at 7 a.m., you drag yourself back home exhausted at 6 or maybe even 8 p.m., you manage a super quick, hey, how was your day, over dinner, and then you just collapse into bed so you can wake up and do the whole shebang all over again. But when we apply the framework we've been talking about, this isn't success, it's a prison. We are literally making choices for financial or professional elevation that essentially turn us into prisoners in our own lives, stripping us entirely of the very time we need to, actually live. And this comparison right here really highlights the tragic irony of this modern prison. You could be what we call the unused therapist. Imagine a doctor or a high-level professional who possesses world-class communication skills. They know exactly what to say to their patients or clients to help them open up and heal. But if they're literally never home, that incredible skill is totally useless to their family. Why? Because family members, and especially teenagers, they do not open up on a rigid schedule during a 5-minute "how was your day" check-in. They just don't. They need a safe harbor. Deep, meaningful conversations almost always happen organically, right after unhurried time spent, just casually laughing, watching TV, eating snacks together. You literally have to be present for the mundane to ever be invited into the profound. So the bottom line is this: true wealth equals time, flexibility, and availability. Having all the theoretical knowledge in the world, knowing exactly how to be an amazing professional, an incredible parent, or the perfect spouse, but lacking the flexibility and availability to actually do it with the people you love, that is honestly a modern definition of poverty. Real wealth is having the actual freedom to decide what to do with your time. And that brings us to our final section, Section 4, choosing happiness over stress. Now, it's really important to be realistic here, and the Seasons of Life framework is incredibly helpful for that. Look, there will absolutely be seasons where you might not have as much time as you want. And you know what? That is completely okay, provided it is short-term and deeply intentional. If you are grinding for a very specific, temporary goal, and you actually have a plan to catch up later, you can survive that season. The real danger, as you can see on the bottom of the timeline here, is the long term. When we completely ignore our availability for years and years on end, just telling ourselves, well, this is just how things are done, we are setting a massive trap that leads straight to deep emotional trauma. Because the cost of that long-term unavailability, the cost of success at all costs, it is just staggering. We so often sacrifice our precious time, working all hours of the day and night just to pay for elite schools or infinite extracurricular activities, genuinely thinking we're doing what's best. But what's the hidden price tag on that? It's children who grow into adults completely unable to understand themselves or communicate effectively. It's deep, sometimes unfixable fractures in the parent-child relationship. And in marriages, taking your partner for granted because of a constant lack of availability leads directly to emotional struggles, separation, and divorce. It's the oldest cliche, but you really don't know what you've got till it's gone, and it is absolutely devastating to only realize you should have been more flexible after the relationship is already destroyed. I really want this number to sink in for a second. 18. That is, generally speaking, the maximum number of years we have the incredible privilege of living with our children under one roof, to pour our values into them, to be physically and mentally present, and honestly, for some highly independent kids, it's even less, maybe 15 or 16 years before they are off doing their own thing. In the grand scheme of an entire human lifetime, that is a wildly brief window. There's only so much input and influence you can possibly have in that time, which makes possessing the actual time to be there infinitely more valuable than just knowing the perfect textbook way to raise them. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to think about. In what areas of your own life are you currently choosing knowing how to do it over actually having the time to do it? Are you being the tortoise, sort of boasting about your perfect theories from the sidelines? Or are you the snake, maybe a little bit awkward, definitely making some mistakes along the way, but actively riding the horse of your own life with the people who matter the absolute most? Take a minute this week to really reflect on the opportunities you might be pushing away just to chase some rigid, exhausting idea of success. Choose flexibility. Choose availability. Choose presence over perfection. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.